At this time, we are going to begin our presentation of the 1964-65 Final Four Wichita State team. This group, or at least most of this group, got together on the occasion of the 46th anniversary of that occasion, and while they were here, Jim Cobey of the NBC affiliate here, KSNW, did a video presentation. It included some interviews and highlights and so forth. So to kind of set the scene and lead us into the rest of tonight's program, let's take another look at that video put together by Jim Cobey.
46 years later, they are still a team.
We had a special group, a group that liked each other, that shared the ball, that did all the things the team's supposed to do.
One of those things is to know where you're at in the game. In November, Coach Gary Thompson died. The time had come to gather, even if a 50th reunion is only 4 years away.
The coaches are gone now, and 2 players are gone. A couple players are pretty sick, and so we wanted to do this. They may have one for the 50th.
But this is now a chance to hear about today.
What we call the Shocker family.
And tell stories about yesterday with one central theme.
They didn't televise it. It wasn't March Madness.
But they did call it the Final Four. Back in 1965, it was a 23-team tournament. The Shockers started in Manhattan, where they beat SMU and Oklahoma State to earn the trip to Portland. Now keep in mind, this was a team without its stars. Dave Stallworth and Nate Bowman did not play second semester. So the Shockers started 5 players from area high schools in the Final Four against John Wooden's UCLA Bruins.
Dave Leach is from McPherson. I'm from Newton. And Kelly, Pete, Mohamed now, and Johnny Curris, and Jamie Thompson were from Wichita.
Jamie Thompson scored 36 points, but the Shockers were beaten 108-89 by the Gail Goodrich-led Bruins. The third-place game against Princeton was worse.
Bill Bradley's amazing performance in this consolation contest wins him an individual scoring record of 58 points.
People ask me who guarded him. I say, obviously nobody guarded him that night.
It was disappointing. It was bittersweet at the time, but it's not now, 45 years later. We were David against Goliath the whole second half of the season, and beat many, many teams that had far more talent than we did, and it was just all teamwork and coaching.
Things to inspire future generations of Shockers.
It's been 46 years, and George Mason, Butler, they've proven that it can happen. It's really special.
Jim Cobey, KSN Sports, Wichita.
All right, if we can invite the members of that Final Four group to please come up on stage with us. Yes, we are ready to go, man. Report in, report in. These guys are going to jump up on stage. Now, this is impressive. Let's do some jumping here, guys. To get us started, I'm going to introduce Mike Kennedy. He's going to give the background of that magical season. Mike Kennedy, the voice of the Shockers for the past 35 years, has not missed one basketball game in 35 years. Has been inducted into 6 Halls of Fame, is the Kansas Broadcaster of the Year. He'll be inducted into the Hall of Fame in North Carolina this summer. Please welcome Mike Kennedy.
Thank you. I want to say just real quickly, I was a junior in high school in that 64-65 season here in Wichita. My parents didn't have season tickets, but I did get to see a couple of games at home that year, including Dave's final game against Louisville. And my uncles always bought tickets to the Midwest Regional, which back then was always in Kansas, either in Manhattan, Lawrence, or here. And so I was there in Manhattan for the regional semifinals and finals, and still one of the greatest thrills of my life. I was a Shocker fan all my life, and this is a great honor and privilege to get to be part of this. Wichita State came into that 64-65 season with all 5 starters returning from a 23-6 Elite 8 team in 63-64, but it was known going in that Dave Stallworth would run out of eligibility at the end of the first semester because he had joined the 61-62 team at mid-year. Shockers were ranked third by the AP, fourth by UPI in the preseason polls, climbed to number one for the first time ever after a 4-0 start. On December 14th, the top-ranked Shockers met number 2 Michigan at Cobo Hall in Detroit, and Michigan won 87-85 on a long last-second shot by All-American Cassie Russell after Dave had been forced out of bounds at the other end without a call. Shockers went on to improve to 7-1, then lost to St. Joseph's 76-69 in the finals of the Quaker City Invitational in Philadelphia. Hometown St. Joseph's shot 27 free throws to the Shockers' 7. That was followed by 5 more wins, including the first win over Bradley in Peoria in the history of the program, bringing the record to 12-2, and it moved the Shockers to 3rd and 5th in the polls. And then came the news on January 21st that starting center Nate Bowman had failed anatomy and that he was officially ineligible for the remainder of the season. On January 29th, the Shockers, in their first game without Nate, lost at Loyola Chicago 93-92 in overtime. And one night later, Dave Stallworth closed out his sensational career at Wichita State in a 96-76 win over Louisville at the Roundhouse. He departed with the Shockers at 13-3 overall, 5-0 in the Missouri Valley Conference. In commenting on the loss of both Bowman and Stallworth, head coach Gary Thompson said, "Naturally, this eliminates some of our power. But I have a lot of confidence in these kids. We are not going to fold." And he was right. The Shockers did not fold. With a revamped lineup, which included no starter taller than 6'5", Wichita State went 6-4 the rest of the way, finished the regular season 19-7, won the school's first ever outright Valley title, 11-3, and a second straight trip to the NCAA tournament. As you saw mentioned in the video, all 5 starters over that final portion of the season were within 60 miles of Wichita. Kelly Pete and Jamie Thompson from Wichita East, John Criss from Southeast, Vernon Smith from Newton, and Dave Leach from McPherson. In the regional semifinals, the Shockers beat SMU, and then in one of the most amazing and complete performances in the history of Wichita State basketball, they beat 13th-ranked Oklahoma State, the Big 8 champion, in the regional finals, and beat Hank Iba, the master of control basketball, crisp passing, at his own game. Played Oklahoma State's game and beat them at it. Although the Shockers lost to UCLA and to Princeton in the Final Four, to go through the adversity that that team faced and make it an improbable run to the Final Four will always remain one of the most memorable accomplishments in the history of Shocker basketball, and it is a great pleasure to honor these men tonight on the 50th anniversary of that accomplishment. We are going to introduce you to each of the members of that team. Get your butt up here. Lanny, get up here. There's a chair for you up here. We'll explain why Lanny's reticent here in just a moment. And if you'll bear with us, I'll get out of the way here a little bit. And here we go.
Thanks, Mike. We're going to start with Gary Thompson, the head coach on the Final Four team. It was his first year as head coach after serving as an assistant for Ralph Miller for the previous 7 years. Gary was a 1950 graduate of Wichita East High School. He even played for Ralph in high school as well, and then was reunited with him as a sophomore at WSU when Ralph became the Shockers head coach. Gary was the floor leader on WSU's 27-4 NIT team in 1954. He scored 573 points in his 3-season career and averaged a career-best 10.7 points per game as a junior in 1953. After graduation, Gary was commissioned in the U.S. Air Force. He actually began his coaching career as the head coach of the Air Force Base team at Ardmore, Oklahoma, before joining Ralph Miller's staff in WSU in 1957-58. Gary became the Shockers head coach prior to the 64-65 season when Ralph left to accept the head coaching position in Iowa. And Gary remained the head coach at WSU for 7 years, through 1970-71, winning 93 games along the way. In addition to leading WSU to an MVC title and the Final Four with a 21-9 record in his first season, Coach Thompson produced a 17-10 team in 1966, which went to the NIT. After basketball, Gary became a very successful Pizza Hut franchisee, and Bob Powers feels particularly indebted to Gary for helping Bob make some very important decisions at a critical point in his life. Gary was a good coach to us all. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 78. Gary Thompson. And we'd like Gary's family to stand, if you would, please, as well. Gary's family would stand. They're like family to all of us, the Thompson family. Thank you all very much.
Verlin, Andy Anderson, was in his first year as an assistant at Wichita State in the 64-65 season. He had come to Wichita State as a student athlete in the fall of 1951 from McPherson High School, where he was an all-state standout in basketball, football, and track. Over his 4 seasons at WSU, he improved steadily every year, averaging 8.2 points per game as a senior, graduating in the spring of 1955. He coached basketball and track at Conway Springs for a year, then was called into the Army. After his discharge, he worked in the insurance business before being lured back into coaching at Cimarron, Kansas, where he won 2 straight conference titles. He moved to Ark City for a year, and then when the change occurred at Wichita State, he was asked by his college teammate, Gary Thompson, to join his staff at Wichita State heading into this 64-65 season. He remained on the staff at WSU for 6 years through 69-70 and was also the head baseball coach over that 6-year span. He died at the age of 60 in 1994. Verlin Anderson, would his family please stand?
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Dee. Ron Heller. Ron was an assistant varsity coach and the head freshman coach in 64-65, which was his first year on the staff. He was one of the many Shocker athletes recruited from the Pittsburgh area in the 1950s and 1960s. Ron came to WSU virtually unknown out of McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and he went on to become a Shocker Hall of Famer. Ron was a 3-year starter. He scored 1,022 points. He averaged 13.1 points per game and 9.8 rebounds for his 3 seasons. He was all MVC in 1961 when he averaged 17.4 points per game and 10.3 rebounds. After playing for the Denver DC Truckers in the old NIBL, he was the head coach briefly at Douglas, Kansas High School before being asked to join the WSU staff. Ron remained a Shocker assistant for 12 years, 7 with Gary Thompson and 5 with Harry Miller. Then he left coaching for the banking business. During the time he was in the banking business, he was also the color commentator on WSU radio and TV broadcasts for 4 years. Then he returned to coaching at Friends University. He coached there for 19 years as the head men's basketball coach and the athletic director. As the basketball coach, he won 5 KCAC championships and was the KCAC Coach of the Year in 1988. He was also the athletic director at Friends, and for that 19-year period, he added 9 new sports to Friends' catalog and was District 10 Athletic Director of the Year in 1987. Ron retired from Friends University after a sterling career and moved back behind the microphone to help Mike Kennedy, as Bob Hull and I have done for these many years. And he was a commentator on the radio broadcasts once again. Coach Heller was elected to the Shocker Sports Hall of Fame in 1989 and the Friends University Sports Hall of Fame in 2006. Ron Heller died in 2006 at the age of 68. His front page obituary informed us that the beloved coach, Ron Heller, had died. He was an excellent basketball coach. He was a good man, and he was truly beloved. Ron Heller. And would Ron's family please stand? Coach Hellers. Thank you, Dee.
Lanny Van Emen, and I know Lanny's a little uncomfortable about being included because technically he had moved on to the University of Iowa that year, went with Ralph Miller to the Iowa staff. But everybody here felt like Lanny should be included because he helped recruit most of this team and was certainly very much a part of it. He is another Shocker Hall of Fame player from McKeesport, Pennsylvania. As a transfer from North Carolina State, he became eligible at the end of the first semester in the 58-59 season, and under the rules in effect at the time, ran out of eligibility at mid-year in 61-62. He played in 80 career games at WSU, scored 1,119 points, averaging 14 points per game, and was one of the finest free throw shooters in the school's history at 82.6% for his career. In his final season at WSU, he hit one of the most famous shots in the program's history, a buzzer beater which took down top-ranked Cincinnati, ending the defending national champions' 27-game winning streak. Also a fine baseball player, he played 1 year in the New York Yankees organization, then went into coaching, joining Ralph Miller's staff here in the 62-63 season. After moving with Ralph to Iowa as an assistant for 6 years, he became the head coach at Arkansas, earning Southwest Conference Coach of the Year honors in 1973. His extensive resume also includes stints as a college assistant with Western Kentucky, West Virginia, Oregon State, and Arizona State, as an NBA assistant and scout with the Boston Celtics, Dallas Mavericks, and Orlando Magic, and head coach in the professional league in Spain. Lanny Van Emen, and I know Lanny's daughter is here at least.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thanks, Lanny. Then we move to Tom Reeves. Tom Reeves was the trainer on that Final Four team. He was a native of Concordia, Kansas, and graduated from Wichita State in 1962. When Tom was a student at WSU, he served as an assistant trainer to Dick Vandervoort. He became the head trainer immediately after graduation. So at the age of just 24, in 1964-65, Tom was already in his third year as WSU's head trainer. On October 2nd, 1970, Tom was on board the Shocker charter flight that crashed near Loveland Pass in Colorado. Tom initially survived the crash, and despite being horribly burned, he was able to lead the other survivors down the mountain to the highway where they received help. Tom died a short time later. He was only 30 years old. Tom Reeves, who spent his entire career taking care of our Shocker heroes, helped save the lives of many Shockers on that worst of days in Colorado, and died, quite probably, the greatest hero of us all. Tom Reeves was inducted into the Shocker Sports Hall of Fame in 1986. And Diane Coons, Diane, please stand. Ed, too, if you would, please. Please. Tom Reeves.
By the way, as we mention your names and you're up here, you might give a wave so everybody knows which one you are. And this is Dr. Charles Chuck Brosky. Chuck was a team manager for the 65 team. He was also a baseball letterman and was coached by Lanny Van Emen in baseball. He became a longtime educator and coach in the state of Ohio, and interestingly enough, as a high school coach at Garfield Heights, one of his players was recruited to play at Iowa by Ralph Miller. He retired from the teaching profession as a professor at Cuyahoga Community College, but he still keeps his hands in the world of sports as the chief statistician for the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers, a position that he has held throughout the 45-year history of the team, and which will continue when he goes back to work a game on Sunday night in Cleveland. Chuck Brosky.
That's a good one. Any of Chuck's family? Chuck, any of your family here with you, sir? Yes, we'd like. There you are. Please stand and let us acknowledge you as well. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your husband with us. The next person we want to profile is not here yet, and will be tomorrow night. Don Harmeson is the next one that we'll be talking about. Don was the manager on the Final Four team. He was a Shocker baseball letterman in 1964 and 1965 as an outfielder. Don's head baseball coaches were Lanny Van Emen and Verlin Anderson. John Criss was a baseball teammate of Don's as well. Don is a longtime teacher and coach and began his career in California after graduation. He then returned to the Wichita area to become the head football and baseball coach at Campus High School from 1973 to 76. Don then moved to White City, Kansas, where he still resides, initially to coach and teach, and then to serve as White City's principal. Don has been in the cattle business for a number of years and is one of the financial sponsors for this reunion. Don had important family commitments this weekend. His daughter is giving birth to a grandchild, so he couldn't be here. He wishes everyone his best, but he will be here tomorrow night when we honor these heroes at halftime of the Shocker game tomorrow. Don Harmeson.
Time to introduce the players from the 64-65 team, beginning with a 5'10", 165-pound junior guard from Wichita Southeast High School, an all-city standout before signing with the Shockers. He was a key reserve on the 64-65 team until the departure of Stallworth and Bowman, and then became a starter and finished the season averaging 6.8 points per game and made 28 of 30 free throws for 96.7%. He averaged 8 points per game in the 4 NCAA tournament games and had 2 key steals in the regional title game against Oklahoma State. As a senior in 1966, he averaged over 6.5 points per game, 2.2 assists, shot 47% from the field, and finished his career as an 89% foul shooter. He then went into coaching, was the head coach at his alma mater, Southeast High School, for one season in 1970, going 17-7 and leading them to the state tournament. He was the Shocker freshman coach in 71 and then went 79-50 in 4 years as the head basketball coach at Coffeyville Community College from 71-72 through 74-75. He was also a WSU baseball letterman, and his son Matt pitched for the WSU baseball team as a second-generation Shocker athlete in 1990. The most even-tempered member of the 64-65 team, Johnny Criss. And would John's family please stand?
That's funny. Gerald Davis. Let's see, we've got Gerald Davis next. Gerald Davis was a 6'9", 185-pound junior from Brooklyn, New York during the Final Four run. As a freshman, Gerald scored 33 points versus an Emporia State squad and 30 versus Coffeyville Community College. In 1963-64, Gerald played in 17 games as a sophomore, averaged 2.6 points and 2.1 rebounds per game. On December 5th, 1964, his basket provided the Shockers 109th and 110th points against Long Beach State. That tied a record for most points scored in a game by a Shocker team. Moments later, Gerald scored again to break the scoring record as WSU went on to win 114-78. Gerald played in 24 of 30 games that Final Four season. He averaged 2.9 points and 2.4 rebounds a game. Very few people play in a Final Four game. Fewer yet score a basket in a Final Four game. Gerald saw action in 3 of the 4 NCAA tournament games. He scored points against both UCLA and Princeton at the Final Four. Gerald Davis. And Gerald, do you have any family members here today? Any family members? Gerald Davis. There we go. Thank you very much. Gerald Davis.
In 1965, Dave Leach was a 6'5", 210-pound senior from the basketball hotbed of McPherson, Kansas. After averaging 4 points per game in a backup role in 63, he moved into the starting lineup as a junior and averaged 9 points and 5 rebounds for the 64 NCAA tournament team. As a senior co-captain, he became one of the team's most important leaders, especially after the departure of Stallworth and Bowman, and earned all Missouri Valley Conference honors, averaging 12.3 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 3.2 assists, and shooting 46.5% from the field. He was such a deadly shooter from the baseline that it became known as Leach's Alley. Playing center at just 6'5", he averaged 11 points and 5.8 rebounds in the 4 NCAA tournament games, including a 12-point, 10-rebound double-double against eventual champion UCLA in the national semifinals. A true student athlete, he was both student body president and senior class president at WSU, and an academic All-American as a senior. He completed his bachelor's degree in 1965 and a master's from WSU in '68. He went into coaching following graduation, serving successful stints at Southeast High School, where he was 57-8 in 3 years, and at Burlington Junior College in Iowa, then joined Ralph Miller's staff at Oregon State. He was an assistant there for 10 years, and then the head coach at Boise State from 80-81 through 82-83. Dave Leach. And would Dave's family please stand?
All right. Thank you, Dave. There we have it. Thank you, folks, very much. Then we have Tommy Newman. Tommy Newman was a 6-foot, 165-pound sophomore from Fort Worth, Texas, Pascal High. He was known for his speed and quickness coming out of high school. Tommy was a second-team Texas All-Stater, and as a freshman at Wichita State, he averaged 13 points a game and shot 50.5% from the field. But then he suffered a knee injury prior to the 64-65 season, and he received a medical hardship. The knee problems continued to plague Tommy during the remainder of his time at WSU. He was able to play in only 8 games during the 65-66 season and 3 more in the 66-67 season before having to hang up the sneakers. Tommy's jump shot was picture perfect, and his injury was a significant loss for the Shockers. Tommy went into coaching while still at WSU, and he began a legendary high school coaching career in his native Texas in 1970. After leading 5 straight teams to the state playoffs, he was hired as an assistant coach at Baylor, where he served in that role for 5 years. Tommy then became the head coach at Texas Wesleyan for 1 year, and he won 30 games in that 1 year. It was 1982-83. Then he coached at North Texas for 3 years, from 83 through 86. Tommy then returned to the Texas high school ranks for another 13 seasons, and over his 18 years as a high school coach, he produced 11 district champions. Tommy's 1996 team at Euless Trinity went 32-4, was ranked number 1 in the state, and finished as the Class 5A runner-up. Tommy was inducted into the Texas High School Basketball Hall of Fame in 2000. Tommy Newman. Tommy. And Tommy's family, would you please stand? Tommy's family, thank you very much. There we go. Tommy Newman. That's me. And then the next is Larry Nosich. Larry was a 6'7", 190-pound senior from, where else? McKeesport, Pennsylvania. He learned to play on a basketball goal attached to a telephone pole. Good thing they didn't have cell phones back then, Larry. Larry did not play high school basketball because of the distance between the school and his home. The transit system did not run that late to be able to take him home after practice, so he played in industrial leagues. Larry played in 61 games in 3 seasons at WSU, averaging 1.3 points and 1.3 rebounds per game. He averaged 1.5 points in 21 games for the 65 team, and he made 12 of 23 shots for an amazing 52.2% from the field that year. On December 17th, 1962, WSU knocked off 4th-ranked Arizona State, 92-90 in overtime, handing the Sun Devils their first loss of the season just 1 week after the Sun Devils had defeated both Kansas and Kansas State. Nasic, then a sophomore, scored only 2 points that night against Arizona State, but they came on a 10-foot jump shot with 5 seconds left in overtime to win the game. On March 13th, 1964, after Creighton had cut WSU's 15-point lead to just 3 late in a first-round game of the NCAA tournament, Nasic scored 3 straight baskets, and then, after a couple of Creighton free throws, scored once again to restore the lead to 9 points with 4 minutes to go, a game which Wichita State won. Larry Nasic. And would Larry's family stand, if you please? We have Larry's family here. All right, thank you.
There's a very young Bob Powers, 6'8", 225, a sophomore from Washington, Pennsylvania. He played in 2 games on the Final Four team, scoring 2 points and handing out 2 assists. Played in 6 games as a junior in 65-66, scoring 4 points and averaging 1.5 rebounds. Bob decided in his career that he probably wasn't going to continue to play a lot, and he went to Gary Thompson and said, I really think I need to concentrate on school. And Gary was very understanding and kept him on scholarship so he could finish his degree. And that's one of the reasons that Bob has put in so many hours and worked so hard to bring this whole thing together. He has remained in Wichita since his graduation, building a successful business, and I think he and his wife, Joanne, need to be inducted into the Cape and Mount Carmel Hall of Fame for providing that school with several outstanding basketball players, both sons and daughters. Bob Powers. I have to say, in my student days at Wichita State, this was absolutely one of my favorite players to watch. And this is the first time that he's been back for one of these things. It's a great pleasure to welcome Melvin Reed, 6'5", 190-pound sophomore from Dallas, Texas. See if I can get it on the right picture here. There we go. Melvin became a key 6th man on that 64-65 team after the changeover at mid-year and ended the year at 4.2 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, averaged almost 5.5 points and 4.7 rebounds in 3 NCAA tournament games, including 7 points and 7 rebounds in the regional semifinal win over SMU. Over his last 2 seasons, he played as an undersized postman, using his speed and quickness to battle the likes of Joe Allen of Bradley, Rick Roberson of Cincinnati, Bob Nedolicki of Drake, and Wes Unseld of Louisville, all much bigger than he was. As a junior in 1966, he averaged 13.3 points per game and 6.6 rebounds. As a senior, averaged 17.4 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, shot .498 from the field, and .704 from the line. He helped lead the Shocker teams he played on to an average of 17 and 10 per year, despite usually being the team's tallest player at 6'5". He was also the Missouri Valley Conference high jump champion in 1965 and 67. Melvin Reed. Any of Melvin's family here? Yes, sir. There we go. Thank you.
Next is Jerry Raymond. Jerry was a 6'8", 210-pound senior from guess where? Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. He came to WSU after earning honors as a Pennsylvania Junior College All-Star at Point Park College in 1963. During his 2 years as a Shocker, Jerry developed a reputation as a valued player who could be trusted to make good decisions on the floor. He played on 2 NCAA tournament teams at WSU and saw action in both Final Four games, a standard that is held by very few college players. Jerry was a rugged player. He made WSU a better team, and he played a critical role in helping the Shockers get to the Final Four. After basketball, Jerry established a career as a successful investment banker, and he's lived in Lawrence since the late 1970s. Jerry Raymond. Any of Jerry's family members here, if you please? And there we have them. Jerry Raymond. Thank you.
Mohamed Sharif, known in his college years as Kelly Pete. He was a 6'1", 190-pound junior from Wichita East. He was All-State, most valuable player of the state tournament in 1962 when he and Jamie Thompson teamed to lead the Blue Aces to the state title. He immediately moved into the starting lineup as a sophomore in 63-64 and was a huge factor in WSU, going 61-25 over his 3 varsity seasons, going to 2 NCAAs and 1 NIT. He is one of only 11 players in the history of the program to accumulate 1,000 points, 500 rebounds, and 200 assists for his career, averaging 14.1 points, 6.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and shooting 47% from the field, 73% from the line over his 3 seasons. But he is also remembered by his teammates as what we would now call a lockdown defender, and could guard a variety of positions despite only being 6'1" because of his strength, speed, and athleticism. During the second half of that memorable 1965 season, he became the floor leader and go-to guy, finishing at 17.3 points per game, 7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, shot 49% from the floor and 75% from the line. He was named All-Missouri Valley Conference and honorable mention All-America. And he capped it off in the 4 NCAA tournament games by averaging 22 points, 8.8 rebounds, and shot 64% from the field. He was inducted into the Shocker Sports Hall of Fame in 2007, Mohamed Sharif. And I'll just say, Ron, Takeo, Fred, I wouldn't want to try him right now either. Oh, can we have Mohamed's family please stand? A lot of them here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mohamed and Takeo, you don't know how many times we've compared Takeo to you throughout these years, and he's a duplicate, a replica of Mohamed and Takeo. It's a good model to look up to, and in 20 years when we have other all-stars here, we'll be comparing them to you as well. Vernon Smith. Vernon was a 6'4" senior from Newton, Kansas. He originally signed with Oklahoma State, then transferred and sat out the 1962-63 season before becoming eligible in 63-64. After averaging 2.3 points per game as the 7th man on an NCAA tournament team that year, he moved into a much bigger role as a senior on the 64-65 team. In that magical year, Vernon played guard early in the season, then forward after the mid-year adjustments. He ended up as the Shockers' 4th leading scorer at 8.3 points per game, and also averaged 4.4 rebounds, and 2.3 assists per game. Vernon was a solid player. He rarely made a mistake. He shot 46.4% from the field and 77.3% from the line. In the Midwest Regional title game against Oklahoma State, the school he transferred from, he scored 12 points, 2 of 2 from the field, 8 of 9 from the line, and he averaged 10.5 points per game in the 4 NCAA tournament games. Vernon Smith. And Vernon's family, if you'd please stand up. Thank you. There we have it. Vernon Smith. Thanks, Vernon.
If the story is correct, as I have heard it, in the summer of 1960, Ralph Miller was on a flight returning to this part of the country from New York, and he got in a conversation with a young man sitting next to him, and the young man's name was Stone Johnson, and he had just been in Rome competing in track and field for the U.S. in the Olympic Games. When he found out that Ralph Miller was a college basketball coach, he said, "You need to come see my best friend. He's at James Madison High School in Dallas, and he is a terrific player." So Ralph sent his brother and assistant coach, Dick Miller, to see Johnson's friend play, And his name, as it turned out, was Dave Stallworth. It would take too long to go over all the highlights of Dave's career at Wichita State. Suffice it to say, he became the school's first consensus first-team All-American, the holder of every significant record, and remains the greatest player in the program's history and one of the greatest in the history of college basketball. He averaged 24.2 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, and 4.9 assists in 80 career games, shot 53% from the field, 75.5% from the line. But as impressive as those numbers are, and he still holds several school records 50 years after he played, you had to see him to really understand. He could score inside or out. He would have been a great three-point shooter in today's game. At 6'7", he could handle and pass it like a much smaller man, and he could guard any position on the floor. He was extremely unselfish, but when it was needed, he could put up incredible numbers. His school record, 46 points, in an upset of top-ranked Cincinnati in 1963, came against a team which led the nation in scoring defense, giving up an average of 53 a game to entire teams that season. After averaging 13 points per game in his first two NBA seasons, he suffered a heart attack and missed 2 full years, but came back to play another 5 and was a key sixth man on the Knicks' 1970 NBA champions. Unfortunately for this 64-65 team, he had been a mid-year high school graduate, enrolled at WSU for the second semester of 60-61, and Coach Miller decided to bring him onto the varsity at mid-year of 61-62. Under the rules at the time, that left him only the first semester of 64-65, and he averaged 25 points and 12 rebounds in 16 games, leading the Shockers to a 13-3 start and 5-0 in the Missouri Valley Conference. He went out by scoring 45 points at Loyola on January 29th, and the next night, 40 against Louisville in his farewell performance at the Roundhouse on one of the most unbelievable array of shots anybody's ever seen in their life. Dave the Rave Stallworth. Gloria, if you'd remain standing so they can acknowledge you, Dave's wife, Gloria.
Well done. Jamie Thompson, a 6'4", 190-pound sophomore from Wichita East, where he was an all-state basketball player in 1963. As a sophomore at WSU, Jamie saw limited playing time at the beginning of the 64-65 season. But when Dave the Rave ran out of eligibility at the end of the first semester, Gary Thompson gave Jamie the opportunity to make his first start against St. Louis. And Jamie responded well, with 24 points and 14 rebounds. Over the last 14 games of that season, Jamie averaged almost 20 points a game and finished the season at 12.6 points per game and 5 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field and 81% from the line. In the 4 NCAA tournament games, Jamie averaged 19.5 points per game, including 36 in the semifinal game against the eventual national champion UCLA. Jamie went on to win all MVC honors twice. He still ranks 14th in the career point list at WSU with 1,359, and he is 6th in career average at 17.6 points per game. Jamie was a 49% career field goal shooter and still holds the WSU career free throw percentage record career at 85.3%, including a 90.5% record as a senior in 1967, when he made 124 out of 137 free throws. He was missing only one free throw every third game. In 1965-66, during his junior season, Jamie made all 9 of his field goals and all 10 of his free throws, That's 28 points without missing a shot to lead the Shockers to a 100-94 upset of second-ranked Michigan. Are any of Jamie's family members here? There we go. Jamie Thompson, one of the all-time greats. Jamie Thompson. Thank you.
When Dick Miller went to see Dave Stallworth play in high school, Dave's team happened to be playing Fort Worth Kirkpatrick. And Dick came back to Ralph and said, you know, there's a big kid playing for the Fort Worth team we ought to recruit too. They did, and his name was Nate Bowman. In 1965, he was a 6'10", 230-pound senior. He had been All-Missouri Valley in '64, averaging 12.8 points, 8.9 rebounds, and shooting 50%. He was averaging 12.4 points per game and 8.6 rebounds, shooting over 51% through 14 games when that anatomy class felled him at mid-year. He was drafted as the 7th pick in the first round of the 1965 NBA draft by the Cincinnati Royals, played 5 seasons in the NBA with the Bulls, Knicks, and Buffalo Braves, and 1 in the ABA with the Pittsburgh Condors. He was reunited with Dave Stallworth with the Knicks and earned a championship ring in 1970, backing up Willis Reed at center for the Knicks. Any basketball fan alive then will remember going to the 7th game, a question of whether Willis Reed would play. He hobbled onto the court and started and made his first 2 shots, giving the Knicks a huge shot of inspiration. But it was Nate that played 21 minutes in that game, battling Wilt Chamberlain, and had 6 points and 5 rebounds. You may remember that the great Walt Frazier was known as Clyde for most of his career. Nate Bowman's the one that gave him that nickname. He saw Walt wearing a derby hat, which reminded him of the Clyde Barrow character in Bonnie and Clyde. From then on, he was Clyde. Nate also had an interesting post-basketball career, working for a talent agency in New York as a bodyguard and security for many famous show business people. And in February of 1981, he was working for Natalie Cole when the two of them were trapped on the 26th floor of a Las Vegas hotel by a serious fire. Both thought they were going to die, but almost miraculously, 2 firemen were able to break through, get him to the roof, and get him out on a helicopter, the last 2 people out of a fire which killed 8 and seriously injured 253 others. Natalie Cole came out of it unscathed. Nate suffered severe lung damage, which it was believed contributed to his premature death from cardiac arrest at the age of just 41 in December of 1984. Nate Bowman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Mike. Al Troup. That Final Four year, Al Troup was a 6'7", 190-pound sophomore from Hubbard, Ohio. He had led his high school team to 2 straight conference championships, and he averaged 21 points per game as a senior in 1963. He was a player that the Shockers felt they had to have. After averaging over 11 points and shooting 54% for the WSU freshman team in '64, he saw valuable action in both 64-65 and in 65-66 for the Shockers as a sophomore and junior. In '66, he was perfect from the field against both New Mexico State and North Texas State. For the 1965 team, he appeared in both Final Four games. Al's tenaciousness and intelligence carried over into his life after basketball, and both he and his wife have had successful business careers and have lived in Northern California, the Virgin Islands, and Colorado. Al Troup. And Al, you have some family members here as well, if they'd please stand. There we go. Al Troup. Thank you, Al.
Manny Zaffiris. Let me find you, Manny. Manny was a 5'11", 160-pound senior guard from New York City. He played in 2 games for the 62-63 team, making his only shot for 2 points, and in 4 games as a senior in 64-65, registered 2 assists. Manny has spent most of his adult life in Bradenton, Florida, where he became very involved with the sport of tennis. He was the athletic director at Bradenton Prep and coached the girls' tennis team to a state championship in 2007. His son Jason, who's here, won 104 matches in a 4-year collegiate tennis career at Arizona and Florida State. And Manny has had contact and worked with the tennis coaches here at Wichita State. Manny has also recently returned to his basketball roots as the public address announcer for the State College of Florida games, and he was along for the Shockers' Final Four run 2 years ago, speaking at the pep rallies in Los Angeles and Atlanta. Manny Zaffiris.
Now, Dave is going to say something. He's the only one. If you want to...
It would be so much fun. Oh, Manny, we didn't get Manny's family. Manny's family, there we go, sorry. It would be so much fun to just...
We were saving it, Robert, but that's okay.
We didn't ask Bob's family to stand. Would Bob Power's family please stand? I'm sorry. There we go.
We're actually going to do a couple things for you later on in the program. We should have told you beforehand, so we'll ask them to stand again later. Thanks.
It was basically everybody else that hadn't stood already here in the room. Obviously, it would be a lot of fun to just let these guys talk about that season and tell stories, and I would love to do it, but we'd be here all night, and there's a game tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. So we have asked one person to speak on behalf of the team, just say a few words about that special season and the special bond that these guys have, and we thought the appropriate one would be the team captain, Dave Leach. Dave?
Thanks, Mike. Well, it's a real honor for us as a team to be here and to see the great support that the Shockers still get in this fine city. We appreciated all your support over the years when we were playing. It's great fun to watch the games from Oregon now on TV, and as all the other guys have said basically the same thing, and see all you people going crazy for the Shockers. It's we were thrilled when the guys a couple of years ago made the Final Four. Now we have someone to celebrate with in the future. Coach Marshall, as you all know from watching, has done a fantastic job, and his guys are to be congratulated for their great effort night in and night out. One of the great things about the group that I had the privilege of playing with was that exact thing. We liked each other a lot. Dave Stallworth was a great example of a guy, although he was so much better than the rest of us that it wasn't even funny. But one of Dave's great characteristics was that he shared the ball. If somebody else was open, had a better shot, they got the ball. If somebody needed a little help on defense, Dave was always there to help out. So he was just a great example while he played with us, and then Mohamed took up that role. And as I told him this afternoon, I wondered if they still had saddle sores from all of the rest of us riding them so hard for all those years. But it's a great privilege to be here. We thank you all for your support back then. We really appreciate and relish the support that you show for this team now. And we're with you. Go Shockers.
Thank you, Dave.